may be wondering why we're calling SisterCarrie naturalism. Well, for number one, the setting is unsavory. Even the beautiful bright lights of the city lure human beings to their death, moths to the flame. And the characters, honestly, are dim witted. It's not an insult, it's just a statement of fact. The environment traps and destroys the moral goodness of Carrie and takes a life of Hurstwood. And there's no real wisdom or growth gained by the human suffering. People just suffer along, some enduring it better than others, but all of them really paying a price for living in the world. And we're set up for this in chapter 1. When you begin reading SisterCarrie, you'll immediately notice that Theodore Dreiser is grounded in realism. He lays on details to present a slice of life, but his narrator is also sentimental and tells us how to think about particular things. So here's chapter 1. Caroline Meeber boarding the train for Chicago from her home in Wisconsin. It was August 1989, Dreiser's narrator tells us. She was 18 years of age, bright, timid, and full of the illusions of ignorance and youth. So we get the details of a young girl leaving home to go off to a big city and try her hand at making it on her own. But our narrator also tells us, and perhaps even forebodes for us, that things are not going to go as planned. And in case we've missed any of this, the narrator reminds us on the next page that SisterCarrie just is not all that bright. She's naive and ignorant. She doesn't understand the magnitude of this decision to leave home and try to make it on her own. To be sure, she was not conscious of any of this, the narrator tells us. And then wrapping up that little section, the narrator gives us two options. When a girl leaves home at 18, she does one of two things. Either she falls into the saving hands and becomes better, or she rapidly assumes the cosmopolitan standard of virtue, sorry about that, and becomes worse. Of a balance between the two, there is no possibility. Well, to be fair, Dreiser did begin writing the novel in 1889 and was not ready to be published in 1900. It took him a full 11 years to write his sister's story. But at the time, there were very few options for women, so we have to acknowledge that. Check this, though. We have from the very beginning this foreshadowing, the foreboding that things will not turn out well. The city is presented as this cunning seductress that is going to be the source of Carrie's undoing. And then to drive that home without a counselor at hand to whisper cautious interpretations, what falsehoods may not these things breathe into the unguarded ear? Unrecognized for what they are, their beauty, like music, too often relaxes, then weakens, then perverts the simplest human perceptions. So almost immediately, while she's on the train, she's set upon by Drouet, a player, and Dreiser goes to some detail to present Drouet's fine clothing and the appearance that he made. This, of course, would appeal to Carrie, as we had just been told that she likes things, she likes stuff. She's pretty intellectually shallow, but she's after the fanciful good life, and she's filled with self-interest. Let's sidestep and take a little look at Drouet. He also is not very bright, but in my opinion is probably the most likable character in the novel. And Dreiser wants us to record the image of Drouet in our mind as a character type. So he writes, at least this order of individuals should permanently pass, Let me put down some of the most striking characteristics of his most successful manner and method. Good clothes, of course, were of the first essential. The things without he was nothing. A strong physical nature, accentuated by a keen desire for the feminine, was next. A mind free of any consideration of the problems or forces of the world, and actuated not by greed but an insatiable love of pleasure, woman pleasure. I've asked you to read the first 10 chapters, and in those chapters you will meet all of the major characters: Carrie, Drouet, and Hurstwood. I've included Minnie and Hanson on the screen for the time being, though they fade into oblivion pretty quickly when Carrie stops living at their home and becomes a kept woman, first of Drouet's and later of Hurstwood's. When she tires of the life she lives as Hurstwood's mistress, she strikes out on her own, goes to New York City, and becomes a Broadway star. There's no indication that she remembers how she got to where she got or who she used along the way. In fact, by the end of the novel, she's wholly oblivious to anyone else's suffering. Well, of course, Hurstwood and Drouet were using Carrie too, so maybe she doesn't have to be compassionate toward them. But boo hoo, by the end of the novel, no one has grown any wiser. And in this, Dreiser offers up a kind of sad commentary on the shifting economy as people move from the rural areas, losing their sense of community and values, and into the city.